Aloha. I'm Aukahi Austin Seabury. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist by training, and I'm an olapa in Halau ke A'ali'i Kumakani under Kumhula Manu Boyd. So one of the things that I know about us as a lahui is that we are connected, that pilina is the center of kind of our whole value system. Pilina to kanaka, pilina to each other, pilina to the aina and the natural elements, that those kinds of relationships are really central to who we are as people, right? If someone says, what is it to be Hawaiian, you can't not talk about those things. And so when we talk about what has been the impact of this immense loss on our community, and we think about Native Hawaiian health and well-being as kind of that balance of that lokahi triangle that many people talk about often, where you've got akua, aina, and kanaka. When we look at what happened in Lahaina and in Kula, what we see is that there's a disconnect now with aina. The aina was hurt. The homes were hurt, especially if we think about our families as very pili to the homes, especially the folks that have been there for generations, or they just got their very first home that's their own. Those homes being lost, that is an eha right at the core of who we are, because it's pili to aina, right? And that's who we are. It's a central keystone of us as a people. And then if we look at the other part, which is our pilina kanaka, right? Our relationship to one another, and we say, well, and in that moment, community got fractured. That the people of those communities that are displaced, however temporarily or permanently, are missing that sense of community that is associated with being of that aina. And so those relationships got shaken. And so I would say, if I had to describe how that rings or hits different for Native Hawaiians of that community, especially those that have mo'okuauhau there, and even those who don't, but just have grown to become kupa of the place, I would say that ʻike, that eha, that kaumaha is in all of those things, that it impacts us in our most foundational ways, right? That part of those two parts of the triangle are shaken. In another way, I want to say that one of the gifts of being Hawaiian in this moment is that we think of ohana as larger than just our nuclear family. And in that way, so many of the ohana that got displaced by the fires, temporarily or for many years, had ohana to go and stay with. There was this automatic, what are we doing, that I was able to hear from folks that they were welcomed somewhere, even if we're all sleeping on the floor, that there's somewhere to be, that we have people. And so one of the things that sort of was encouraging for me was to hear that in the initial response when the shelters were open, that they were expecting more people than came, but that's because so many were taken in by their ohana in other parts of the island. And so for me, that's about one of the strengths of our people. Another of the strengths of our people is that we know how to lean into our ʻike kūpuna. And so, as is true of our history, there have been many times when we as a people have experienced tremendous loss. And so we have the wisdom in us that we can lean into for how to survive hard things, how to endure, how to keep going through them, and even how to carry ourselves in the face of something hard. And I think that leaning into that is also one of the things that we have going for us. I guess I want to say, like, what are characteristics of Native Hawaiians? Well, we are as different as the colors of the rainbow if you ask about what people want or need in this time of healing. And at the same time, to say we have that wisdom to lean into. We have those practices that teach us, where do we put our grief? How do we grieve? How do we come together when we feel afraid? How do we persist, right? Bravery is not about not being afraid. Bravery is continuing to move while you're afraid, right? That's what bravery is. How do we do that? How do we convince ourselves to keep working? We're a hardworking people. So, if it's about sweat, we'll put it in. We'll do the exertion. We'll make the offering. That's fine. And so I think those values and characteristics are what gonna characterize the way we move forward and how it initially hit us. So many families talked about the first thing, even when they had a big loss, was worrying about everybody else. That's very us, right? The first thing you do when something hits you hard is go look and see who else is harmed and how you can help them. And so I feel like, I don't know, maybe those are just the beginning of some ways. We learn from traditional practices, and sort of just generally from a Hawaiian worldview, that when we enter into something, any space, that, especially like a ceremonial space, but any space really, we have to first pale ourselves, which means to pale, to barrier, to protect ourselves and be ready with what we're going to need to be able to not absorb the kaumaha or the energy or whatever is coming in that space that we've opened. And so the first of the practices that I would say is pale. So how do you, let's say you're going to go into a hard conversation, or you're going to go into a room where people are now healed enough, or that as they move through healing, where they're wanting to tell their stories about what happened to them and how it hit them. So because people are wanting to tell their stories, you as a person who survived this, you may not be feeling like hearing about somebody else's stuff today because you're having your own response. And so how do you prepare yourself to be in a space where someone goes like, even saying, hey, how are you? Sometimes that question can kind of make you feel all kinds of things. And so that pale is that barrier that we use to be well enough to enter into a space where there's going to be unknown energy coming at us. So pale practices are going to be really important, especially as we begin to re-enter community. Even just the vista of seeing what has happened there can have a real impact. So being ready really matters. Ho'omalu, the practice of kind of bringing that calm into yourself, is one of the steadying things that I think folks can lean into. And then ho'oku'u, to release. The idea that if we have taken on kaumaha, if we have taken on even just sort of stress, or even this harm, this hurt, these memories of this stuff, that we have to have a kind of release. Ho'oku'u is a very important practice in most ceremonial practices we have, that you release at the end as you close something. And so to think about how do you ho'oku'u in daily life right now becomes really important. And there's various kinds of ho'oku'u. So there's sort of physiological ho'oku'u. There are mental and spiritual kinds of ho'oku'u. There's behavioral things we can do to ho'oku'u, like sweat and exercise and exert. And then kind of on the spiritual side of things, pule is really central to who we are as a people. Now, who and how and what you pule, that idea that pule is right at the center really makes sense because of that triangle, right, of akua, aina, and kanaka. And so the practice of pule, that when we ceremonially do pule, we have to offer something. We exert of ourselves when we pule. And so, right, you have to give something. And so what is that exertion you give? That's your intention, that's your energy, that's your sweat, that's whatever you had to put into to give to be worthy of that moment. And so I would say that probably is another piece of one way that's a hint about a cultural wisdom about how we heal, which is sometimes you have to physically exert, because if the kaumaha or the emotional intensity, right, some of the stuff that occurred, our brains just were not meant for us to survive or process that. So they just shut off and said, no, thank you. I'm not taking in any, I'll think about that later. But right now I'm not dealing with that. And so they just kind of shut down. And that's when people kind of look like they're in shock. They just can't take anymore. And so how you walk out of that is that you have to figure out how to release some of the things that are happening. And so in doing that, we know that one of the hints is that we need physical exertion as part of how we're going to ho'oku'u heavy, hard things that happen to us that maybe were more like emotional or mental, or, even if it's that kind, that exertion is going to be one of the pieces of wisdom we have. So I would say like that maybe is kind of a combination of things that you would do if you were trying to cope with hard stuff. Okay, what are the other cultural practices that we know about around surviving grief and loss, or just surviving hard things, right? I mean, we can lean into our mo'olelo, the epic tale of Hi'iaka Ikopoli o Pele. So we can lean into the story of Hi'iaka and Pele and Lohi'au when we look at how did they survive through adversity. Now, ako olawa ʻike kaua. I live on Oahu, so that mele and that mo'olelo, that part of the tale really speaks to me about when Hi'iaka sees the huge storms coming, and she knows she's about to be torn and tossed and thrown all around. And so how we watch what Hi'iaka does in the face of various kinds of adversity can give us mo'olelo to lean into. So sometimes unpacking what actually happened in our emergency or our big bad yucky thing that happened is hard to do. It's like, okay, sit here and let's talk about how that feels. Oh, that's a lot. Nobody wants to you're like, I'm at school today. I don't want to talk about that. And so another way to come at it is to find healing other ways. One of them is to dive into a mo'olelo about loss and adversity and learn and watch what our kūpuna and our, important people from our history, how did they move through it, as a way to kind of give us maybe like an idea about healing, but also to let it be healing for us, that I'm not alone. I'm not the only kanaka to ever go through this. I'm one among many. I'm following my kūpuna down into history, and this will be one of the mo'olelo of my time in history. So there's something about ending the loneliness of that, right? Of feeling like you belong. That's really important also, and I think that's why we tell these stories, is so that we know we belong to a long tradition of people who endure. And so I think sometimes that can be really healing too. The other healing practices, of course, are, as I had shared earlier, the traditional healing veins of things. We know that healing our hearts and our spirit and our ana'au can be difficult to do. But if we think about Aina, Akua, Kanaka way of approaching it, we kind of have strategies that are informed by each of those that make sense. So what are the Akua parts? How do we heal a broken heart, na'au that's aching, grief? We're gonna pule, right? We're gonna lean into our spirituality. And what are the Kanaka pieces? We're gonna gather. We're gonna be with people when we want to be. We're gonna tell our story and communicate and connect, or we're gonna be the listener that holds the ground for the person while they tell the story. Then what are those Aina strategies? Well, one of the things that is most healing when there are no words for how you feel is to be with the Aina and be with natural elements. Now that's hard when you've lost your Aina. So how do we connect to Aina and the natural elements in a different way when the specific place your heart thinks of or jumps to the minute I say the word Aina is not accessible to you right now? And that's when we say, okay, let's look at Aina more broadly. Where can I still be pili to my Aina? Is it in mo'olelo? Is it in, right? So that's when the stories and the songs and the places really matter, because they bring that Aina to life again for us. Or is it that I need to do Aina things? I need to touch lepo. I need to feel the wind in my hair. I need to be in the rain, because there are no words that are going to soothe some of this eha. There really aren't. And that's okay. That's why we know how to lean into Aina, because it can heal us. It can go where words can't. Whenever we look across all of us at what we need grace, right? We need to give each other space, because right now it's really easy to be irritated and irked by each other. So there's like tempers are flaring, and or people are like phasing out in the middle of things. They just can't right now, or whatever that stuff is, and or they're just sad. Or they're the person who's like, never mind, I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want to feel as normal as I can. So I'm going to be busy over here. All of those are really, really normal responses. And so one of the things that we can do is give ourselves a lot of grace and space to let whatever we're doing right now be okay, and then give each other grace and space. So you have to check at any moment. Is now a good day to have the hard conversation with someone about something? I already had one hard one today. No, not today. I'm full up, thanks, right? So we have to know how to move for ourselves and how to heal. And then the other thing, which is very us, is to lean into Aina, is to be in the natural elements, is to go outside and let the rain hit your face, right? We're happy to feel rain again. So if we can feel it, there's some healing we all have to do with the wind here, right? The wind played a role. And so we have to find our way to be okay that the different kinds of wind are our friend again. Being in the kai, being part of that, I think is healing and very restorative. That and leaning into cultural practice. So if you have a spiritual practice or cultural practice where you gather with people, to lean into that now, because it can kind of hold you steady while you can't figure out how you feel yet, or even when you can. I'm a olapa, a hula dancer, and so for me, sometimes things that happen that are hard, one of the most important ways that I reconcile it, that I figure out how to be okay, is through hula, is to put all of that into what I'm doing in any particular dance or oli, and that can help me make sense of it in a way, because that's what the discipline does, is it helps you channel that energy anyway, right? On the pretty, big hair flower side of things, that's when people are like, put all the things you love into this mele about joy and love. And it's like, and in the same way, the things you know about what's hard, the all of that you might be feeling, the weight of everything, can also go in and inform that. We're Hawaiian. We like a little joy with our eha, right? We laugh when we're crying, and we like a little levity with our kaumaha. It's just who we are, right? That we cry for happy, we cry when we're sad, we cry when we're mad. We like to giggle at funerals. It's just part of us, right? We celebrate life while we're at our most sad. That's who we are. And so practices that embrace that. If you feel called to do something fun, don't feel bad that you're having a moment of joy in the middle of all this sadness, because it's part of how we're going to heal and restore. Laughter is a ho'oku'u. It's an important way to release some of the kaumaha that we've got. Because when we think about aina, yes, we think about the lepo itself, the ground, the rocks, the pohaku, the things that may comprise the soil. But for most of us, when we think of our aina, there might be a structure on it. There might be the way your mama's closet smelled. There might be, right? There might be much more to it that's about the home that was there. And so when an ohana loses that, either in a tragedy like this or some other way that over history Hawaiians have lost land or lost the places that they lived, we know that the impact of that can be really profound. That's a pretty word for it sucks. It's hard, it's big, it's foundational to who we are. And so then the question is, okay, so does that mean we just lie on the ground and we're pau? And well, we have to grieve that loss. We do. And if we pretend it's not that big a deal, I think we're not doing ourselves a good service in allowing it to heal. And to remember that the aina is still there. It's scratched, it's hurting, it's wounded right now, but it's still there. The pohaku that make up that land, the vai that still finds its sneaky way to flow past all the concrete, it's still there. And so the idea that you can still send your spirit to connect to that aina, and that the aina needs healing now, so it still needs us to love it, matters. And so I think that some of how we grieve has to be about knowing that we need to let the land grieve too, and to send our love into it and give it pule too, because it got bust up this time, but it's aina endures. And so do we. We're stubborn like that. We're still here, right? And so when an ohana Hawaii loses their land or their hale in some way, we remember our mo'oku auhau and know that we would never be able to lose that. That pilina to the aina is always there. Even if now you go live in the aina e, that's still your aina. In every way that matters, pala or not. What is the vista when you look at it? It might look different now. It might hurt to look at it for a long time, but it's still there, And so I want to say it's not a small thing, and it's not the end. It's going to take a lot to walk through it. And the other thing I know about us as a people is we know how to build pilina. So if you have a new place you're going to stay, and maybe a new place you're going to live, you're going to build pilina to that aina. And that aina will recognize you as of lahaina when you greet it, and then welcome you in, because we know how to build pilina with a new place. So even if that's for just a short time, until you go back, or that becomes the new place you settle, right? We're of the people that voyaged across the Pacific. We know how to go and be in a new place. Now, are we excited about looking forward right now? No, because we didn't choose this. We didn't choose this. No. This is not a moment of like, yay, voyaging society, here we come. No. But it is something inside our DNA that we know how to rebuild pilina. We know how to do that. So if we have to, which in this moment, even for just a moment, we might have to, we have that within us. We know how. And we know how to bring everything that's wonderful about us with it. You know what I mean? Because we don't forget how to be Hawaii. We'd never forget the words just because there's nobody singing the same song as us. We still know. We're still us. And so I think that will begin to emerge. It's just that right now it might feel too soon to look forward. Right now we might need to just stay right here in this moment and be sad together. We're allowed to just sit and be sad about it for a minute or many minutes and not rush to choices for what comes next. It's okay if folks feel like they just want everything to just stay still for a minute while they just absorb. Holy moly, that really just happened to us. It's okay to just be like, I'm still in shock. And I don't want to move out of shock because what comes after that is a whole lot of overwhelm. It's okay to say, not yet, I'm not ready. Or the people who are like, nope, holomua, let's go. Let's do it. We're making a plan. We're making moves. Let's do it. Both are not wrong ways to heal. So I think the only way that's not okay is to tell yourself you don't need to heal. So I think that's what we need. But how you do it, how your ohana does it, kiddos tend to be more resilient than the big ones. I think because they can look up at their big person and sort of trust that someone is figuring it out. That's not true for all kiddos, of course, but I think as long as each ohana and each person knows that they have to figure out what they need to heal and starts doing it, however that looks, is really okay. Leaning into our Hawaii is a really good starting point, though. It's a really good place to start, you know? How do we pale ourselves? Well, and how do we ho'oku'u? Well, we pi kai for both, right? We go into the kai to be held for both reasons, to get ready to go do something hard and to release when we need to. So yeah, our cultural practices have so much abundance in them to give us in this moment that leaning into it just makes sense. It's one of the gifts of being Hawaii, is we never ever have to be alone in carrying hard things. We have our kūpuna, and so we're never alone if we don't want to be. Now we can ignore, because you know, we're stubborn. We can do that, and we can do whatever way works for us, but is it there? Always. That's just in the koko. I mean, I think the main message is aloha, right? Is that we care. That you're not alone, that there are people who are wanting to help and support in any way that we can. And that it's your right as people who are recovering to say how you want it to be and ask for what you need. I think that's a really important part of it. That word resilience is really interesting. I love that word, and I also go like, okay, but let's remember, being resilient means you had something hard to endure. So nobody wants to be resilient, because that means they have to go through something yucky. So in this moment, I wish you grace and peace to be able to heal in your way, to take your time with it if you want to rush through it if you want to, and to know that you have my immense respect in the weight that you all carry. Because as much as the rest of the world, right, I'm Oahu, and as much as there's tens of thousands of people on me on that island and then all across the world who want to come rushing in to help, we know that this is Maui's to do. The lion's share of the burden will be on you all to decide what you need and to be doing that for your own communities. And then, yeah, you invite in the rest of the flood of us as it is helpful and as it is welcome. And so I guess maybe that my respect in following your lead in what you need is what I have, and that you're not alone in this if you don't want to be leaning into your kūpuna, and then the rest of us running around wanting to be helpful. You got this.